Starting us off at number 10 is Ricardo Ash. This guy has impressive qualifications. He's a gynecologist, obstetrician, endocrinologist, and a fugitive. He pioneered GIFT, aka gamete intrafallopian transfer, which is not something you'd think a criminal could be capable of doing. However, in 1995, Ricardo and his two partners were accused of taking women's eggs without their consent and using it for other patients so they could conceive. 15 children were born from the misuse of these eggs, but he wasn't arrested since technically this wasn't a crime. Worried he could somehow end up in jail, Ricardo sold his properties and fled to Mexico and was arrested in Argentina in 2004. An extradition request for him was denied and he fled back to Mexico, where he was rearrested in 2010. He was set for parole in 2011 and was released, but the US still wanted to extradite him, yet he's nowhere to be found. It's been 9 years, no one knows where the hell Ricardo is. And he stole some people's eggs, so he needs to get arrested. Coming in at number 9 is Vassilis Palitis. From the name you can probably guess that Vassilis is Greek and was accused of being the mastermind behind kidnapping industrialist Yorios Milonas. Greek names are very hard, you guys, just give me a break. The ransom paid for him was eventually traced back to Vassilis, making him the prime and only suspect. Then in 2000, he was convicted for kidnapping the CEO of Haitaglu Bros back in 1995 and sentenced to 25 years in jail. In June of 2006, two of his accomplices hired a sightseeing helicopter and then hijacked it and forced the pilot to fly to the prison at gunpoint. Guards thought the helicopter were prison inspectors and let the prisoners be flown to a cemetery next to the jail, where they all fled, Vassilis included. He was recaptured in 2008 but escaped yet again a year later by helicopter again. A rope ladder was thrown down for him and his cellmate as the helicopter hovered above the jail courtyard. Guards tried firing at the lady in the helicopter, but she had a damn automatic rifle, so they obviously lost. The helicopter was found abandoned in a suburb in Athens with the pilot bound and gagged. There's currently a €1 million bounty placed on any information about Vassilis' whereabouts. Honestly, pat on the back for me for trying to pronounce these Greek names. They all are complicated as hell. At number 8 we have Omid Tavili. Iranian-Canadian Omid is a gangster who is the kingpin of a huge crime family in Canada. The RCMP revealed he was arrested back in 2000 for having 3 kilograms of cocaine on him but was found not guilty. He then ran a scam telemarketing business aimed at Americans and ended up stealing $3 million, mostly from old people that just fell for the scam. He was arrested in British Columbia in 2003 after the US District Court issued a federal arrest warrant for him. 2 years later, he realized $300,000 of his drug money had gone missing and guessed it was his career that had taken it and fled. So to enact revenge, he kidnapped the dude's brother-in-law, sexually assaulted him, and then interrogated him before getting arrested himself. In 2007, the BC Supreme Court ordered him to be extradited to the US, but that didn't scare Omid since Amandeep Singh was his lawyer. The criminal and extradition lawyer that literally represents all these controversial criminals like Rakesh Saxena. Like, you know, he's getting a lot of money for defending these criminals, but whatever. Either way, they filed for an appeal, and while waiting for the result, Omid disguised himself as janitor Edwin Teesney and escaped from jail. No one knows where he is today. Filling at number 7 slot is Alfred Stark. At 92 years old, this man committed heinous war crimes when he was a Nazi in the 40s. Anyway, he was accused of ordering the execution of 117 Italian prisoners of war. This was part of the slaughter of nearly 9,500 officers after the Germany-Italy alliance went to shit. The military court of Rome literally indicted him in 2012 and sentenced him to life in prison, but Germany still refuses to extradite him to Italy to serve his sentence. I've heard about a lot of Nazis that fled to South America and are just living there under new names, but this dude is literally sat at home in Germany hiding in plain sight because he knows the government won't do shit. Like, this man committed war crimes. Those are crimes against humanity and he has to be punished for them. Now at number 6 is John Ruffo. Now this guy was the president of CCS, which is an IBM equipment reseller, before he went into hiding, so I mean, the man had moolah. Either way, in 1992 he met with his friend Edward J. Reynes, who had just been laid off from Philip Morris USA, and he told John about Project Star. It involved pitching a fake project to various bank executives claiming they were working on a top secret operation to develop smokeless cigarettes on behalf of Philip Morris. Newsflash, they're called vapes. Either way, John had a company, so it was very easy to forge everything they needed, and because Edward used to work with Philip, they never actually had to contact him. It was all going to plan until 96 when an employee noticed something off in one of the documents. He contacted Philip, then the FBI, and then everything went tits up. The duo had managed to get $350 million, but the FBI couldn't locate 21 million of it, so either way, where did it go? Edward was arrested and John went on the run. He didn't turn himself in and was last seen taking taking money out of an ATM before never being seen again. His car was found abandoned at JFK Airport, and he's currently still in hiding. $25,000 is being offered for any information on him, and he's actually in the US Marshals 15 most wanted list. Coming in at number 5 is Iqlaq fucker Mohamed Shah. The Indian 29-year-old murderer has been in hiding since 2006. Gudrun Kovinu was an archaeologist that was a part of the Afar expedition undertaken in Ethiopia that led to the discovery of the skeleton Lucy. She was working at the Nepal Research Center and had moved there in 1984. For some reason, and no one knows why, I couldn't figure out why or find out why, but Iqlaq stabbed her to death before beheading her. She's an archaeologist, what did she do? Bund Garden police found her head within 7 hours of the murder and arrested him. The police then gave him 2 weeks parole to try and care for his sick wife, but that was the last time he was seen. They're assuming he ran off with his wife and mum and is currently still in hiding. I just don't get what possessed him to do that. At number 4 is Gilbert Winter. British-born Gilbert worked as a jeweler by day and enforcer for the Addams Family crime syndicate by night. Who knew a jeweler's life could be that dangerous? Nobody. But the Addams Family, aka the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate, is an Irish criminal organisation and is one of the most powerful ones in the UK. They're worth £200 million and have been linked to nearly 30 murders. In 1994, Gilbert and fellow enforcer Ray Barton ended up killing a drug dealer called Claude Mosley with a samurai sword. Which, I mean, fashionable, I have to say. They offed Claude because he was pocketing money from a drug operation run by the Addams Family, and that didn't go down well with them. Gilbert was put on trial for the murder, but since no one would testify, the case was dropped. Fast forward to March 1998, Gilbert vanishes into thin air. He was involved in a weed deal in which £800,000 went missing, so either he ran off with the money or the gang killed him. Saul in the Home, the family's financial advisor who was also part of that deal, was shot months later, so people think Gilbert disappeared so the family wouldn't kill him. Regardless, he's still a murderer and he's still wanted. Filling at number 3 slot is Achimez Gachiyayev. This guy used to serve in the Russian Strategic Rocket Forces and had been accused of being involved in the Russian apartment bombings of 1999 that killed nearly 300 people and kickstarted the Second Chechen War. 4 bombings took place between September 4th and 9th and targeted 4 apartment blocks. The bombs were later found on grounds that Achimez rented with 2 other people who founded his company. After the first 2 bombs went off, he actually called the police and warned them, so maybe he had had a change of heart midway. According to the Federal Security Service of Russia, he was given $500,000 from warlord Ibn al-Khattab for doing the deed. As the case was further investigated, Achimez fled to Georgia and then Turkey. He was last seen in March of 2002 and is still a fugitive in hiding that is wanted for terrorism. Now at number 2 is Pedro Alonzo Lopez. Known as the Monster of the Andes, Pedro is a serial killer who took the lives of many. Growing up, his mother worked as a prostitute, which had adverse effects on him. When he was 8, he was caught touching his younger sister, which caused him to get kicked out of his home. He then fled to Colombia, where a man took him in and repeatedly sodomized him, and the abuse continued even from other males after that. At 18 years old, he started stealing cars for a living and was soon caught and arrested. Apparently, while he was in jail, he was gang raped, and that left him so angry he killed all those involved while he was still in jail. When he got out though, he started killing girls in Peru, and by 1978 he had murdered over 100 people. The police had him but released him, and so he moved to Ecuador, killing up to 3 girls a week. By 1980 he was arrested in an abduction gone wrong and confessed to killing 103 girls, but was released 8 years later for good behavior. Over the next 15 years he was arrested, released, and re-arrested before getting free in 98. He's currently still wanted for killing and over 300 girls in Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. And finally, at number 1 is Xavier Dumont de Legon. I put this one on the list because unsolved mysteries inspired me, to be honest, and the case is very interesting. So back in April of 2011, the family's neighbor got suspicious when the Legon's home was boarded up and decided to call the police. The family was nowhere to be found until a letter came saying they had fled to the US since the parents were DEA agents. That was obviously fake, and after several police visits to the house, the bodies of the wife Agnes, the 4 kids, and the 2 dogs were all found buried in their garden. Xavier's body was not there, and neither was his car. So already we have prime suspect number 1, the dad. Now everyone had been shot by a rifle that Xavier had inherited from his dad 3 weeks prior. Apparently he was under crippling debt and had no money left, and as a count, he didn't want his children or the public to know the family was ruined. He also didn't want his kids to suffer any hardships either, so apparently he thought killing them was the best thing to do. After he fled, he didn't even hide. He was still using his credit card at places and waved at a security camera in southeastern France before taking off with his rifle and leaving his car. If he did commit suicide, the body was never found, and if he fled, well, he's still wanted. Starting us off at number 10 is Sharon Kin. Known as La Pistolera in Mexico, Sharon Kin, also known as Jeanette Pugliese, is the subject of the longest current outstanding arrest warrant for murder in Kansas City history. She actually has one of the longest outstanding felony warrants in history, so I mean, firstly, congrats on your achievements, Sharon. Psych! Now, Sharon married James Kin back in 1956 after she faked her own pregnancy. By 1960, he was contemplating divorce due to her infidelity and spending habits. March 19th, 1960, Sharon heard a gunshot coming from James's bedroom, and she found her 2-year-old daughter Dana with a gun in her hand and James bleeding from a gunshot wound on the back of his head. He was dead before the ambulance even got there. Now, James let Dana play with his guns often, and the death was ruled an accident. The next death was Patricia Jones, wife to Walter Jones Jr., who was having an affair with Sharon. Now, Sharon told him she was pregnant in hopes that he would divorce Patricia, but instead he ended their affair. Later that day, Sharon called Patricia telling her Walter was having an affair with her sister and that she wanted to talk about it. She was never seen alive again, and her body was found that night a mile out of town. She had been shot 4 times. Sharon was trialed for both murders, and in fact there were 4 trials for James's murder. Now, before the 4th one, she was free on bond and fled to Mexico with her lover. There she killed another man in apparent self-defense, which nobody believed. Come on, Sharon, you've killed 2 people now 3. You think the 3rd one is an accident? Hell no. Sharon was sentenced to 13 years in prison but escaped from Iztapalapa prison in December of 1969. She had bribed the guards to look the other way while she escaped, and so a manhunt ensued, and more than 50 years later, she still hasn't been found. Many people think she's dead. Honestly, she's probably not. Coming in at number 9 is Antonio Angeles. The Brazilian Spanish criminal grew up in Brazil and was known as a violent person who often beat up his mother. Antonio moved to Spain, where he continued to commit crimes like robbery, mugging, and drug trafficking before finally being involved in the Alcazar girls. November 13th, 1992, Antonio went for a drive with his friend when they saw 3 girls hitchhiking to a party that a high school was holding at a club. The boys picked them up and passed the venue, after which the girls started screaming because something was wrong. He hit them all with the butt of his gun before tying them all up and taking them to a secluded location. There, all the girls were raped and then forced to get into a pit. Antonio then shot and buried them, and their bodies were found in January the following year. The beekeepers who found the bodies found Antonio's friend's glove and a social security slip from Antonio's brother. Antonio was on the run and was last seen somewhere in Lisbon that year. After that, he either boarded a boat going to Ireland and jumped off of it, therefore drowning and dying, or he went back to Brazil. We have no clue. At number 8, we have Elizabeth Ann Duke. I was like, I really need to try and find some women to put on these lists because it's all men. Gender equality, hello. Now, Elizabeth was part of a Weatherman splinter group called the May 19th Communist Organization. The group claimed credit for a lot of bombings that damaged US government buildings, including the 83 bombing of the US Capitol building. The attack was motivated by the US military's involvement in Grenada and Lebanon that the group was very opposed to. No one was killed or injured, and the damages added up to around $640,000. Elizabeth was arrested in May of 1985 and was indicted on falsification, conspiracy, and weapons charges. 2 months later, she was released on bail and went missing in October, never to be seen again. There's a $50,000 reward for information regarding her whereabouts, but based on the fact that this is part 5 of these lists, you're not gonna find them. Filling at number 7 slot is Frank Matthews, aka Black Caesar, Pee Wee, Mark the Fourth. This guy really had a lot of A-listers. Evidently he thought he was a cool guy. Now, Frank was a drug trafficker that sold a lot of cocaine and heroin throughout the east coast of the US from the mid-60s to the early 70s. For some backstory, he led a chicken stealing gang when he was 14 and then went to juvie for assaulting a farmer who caught him in the act. He was released after a year and moved to Philadelphia, where he made his drug connections with members of the Black Mafia. By the 70s, Frank's drug organization was handling multi-million dollars of heroin. He was in charge of 2 huge drug mills in New York, both of which were very heavily guarded. The DEA had been on to him for a while, and with clashes with the Black Mafia, now was the time to catch him. Easter Sunday 1972, the Black Mafia killed Frank's main dealer in Philadelphia. He was charged in Florida for trying to sell 40 pounds of coke and was arrested in January for conspiracy to distribute and tax evasion. He was scheduled to appear in court in July, but apparently took $20 million and fled the country with his girlfriend, leaving his wife and kids behind. I really wonder how that relationship panned out. It probably didn't. He probably killed her too. Really? You'd run away with your girlfriend? Would you not run away with your wife and kids? Surely that means more. Now at number 6 is Leo Burt. On the 24th of August 1970, Sterling Hall, a building on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, was bombed by 4 men, one of which was Leo Burt. The bombings were carried out in retaliation and protest against the university's research connection with the US military. Floors 2 to 4 in that building were housing the Army Mathematics Research Center for the Vietnam War. And we know how polarizing the opinions on the Vietnam War were in America at the time, so I mean, this is no surprise to anyone. The 4 bombers dubbed themselves the New Year's Gang and had been involved in several anti-war acts before the bombing, so this was really no surprise. The incident killed Robert Fastnacht, a PhD researcher, and injured 3 others. Leo was involved in not only making the bomb, but planting it as well. As soon as it was done, Leo and the others fled to Canada as the FBI tracked them. The last time anyone heard from him was on the 30th of August as he and David fled their apartment as police closed in on them. He was indicted for destruction of government property, sabotage and conspiracy, and is currently still at large. 50 years later, there have been sightings in St. Catharines, Ontario, Lakewood, Washington, but nothing came up. Where are you at, Leo? Coming in at number 5 is Frank Blackhorse. This man's background is extremely debatable. Some say he's a member of the Cherokee Nation, whereas others say he's not even Indian. The FBI think he's Italian Jewish and born in Cleveland, whereas Frank said himself that he was born in Cherokee, North Carolina. Either way, he was part of the Wounded Knee occupation, where followers of the American Indian movement took over and occupied the city of Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The group wasn't happy with the leadership of Chairman Richard Wilson, and so they decided to do something about it. FBI agents responded to the scene and Agent Curtis Fitzgerald was shot in the wrist. No one knows who fired the bullet, but Blackhorse was arrested and charged with the shooting. Come on man, you got shot in the wrist, you didn't die. Let it go. He was released on a cash bond and was scheduled to appear at trial in August of 1974, but never showed up. He was then named a suspect in a shootout that occurred at Jumping Bull compound that resulted in 2 dead FBI agents. Frank made it on the FBI's most wanted list back in the 70s, and he was actually arrested by the RCMP in Hinton, Alberta. Some sources claim he was extradited to the US, some claim he wasn't, and others believe he was just allowed to roam Western Canada freely. No one knows where he is, but apparently he is the key to finding out who killed those 2 FBI agents. Well, he's not gonna help you now after you basically trialed him for shooting somebody's wrist and he didn't even do it. We don't know. We don't know. There's no evidence. At number 4 is Sukumara Kurub. This guy is one of the most wanted criminals in the state of Kerala. In 1984, he was accused of murdering film representative Chaco and has been in hiding ever since. Chaco was found strangled to death and his body had been burnt inside of a car. Kurub apparently committed the crime and killed the man just to fake his own death and claim Chaco's life insurance. That ended up being around $75,000, which was quite a lot of money at the time. He then fled abroad while 2 of his co-accused, his brother-in-law and driver, was sentenced to life in jail. Chaco's murder case is one of the longest standing cases in Kerala, and despite Sukumara's lookalikes popping up here and there, they still haven't managed to track him down. Dude, he ran away with $75,000, killed a man, and left his driver and brother-in-law to rot in jail. Do you really think this guy's gonna be showing up anytime soon in India? Nope. He's living his life in bloody Bali. Filling at number 3 slot is Arthur Lee Washington Jr. Former member of the Black Liberation Army, Arthur was added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list in October of 1989 after trying to murder a New Jersey state trooper. In April of that year, state trooper Michael J. Clayton stopped a car that had an expired inspection sticker on it. The driver of the car was Arthur, who got out of the car when stopped and just kept walking away from the officer. He ignored all of Clayton's commands, and as he began to go after Arthur, the latter pulled out a gun and fired. He missed, and as Clayton returned the fire and reloaded, Arthur had escaped on foot. After searching his apartment, officers found 3 other weapons, and a federal arrest warrant came very quickly after that. He was kept on the FBI's list for 11 years before being replaced. He's still wanted, but most people believe he's dead because if he was alive, he'd be around 71 years old. So I don't get why you think he was dead. He's probably very much alive. 71? People are alive at that time. Now number 2 is Adam Emery. I honestly feel like this case was of a guy losing his shit over his car getting damaged, and it just went horribly wrong after that. Now back in August of 1990, Adam and his wife Elena were eating at a restaurant when his car was sideswiped by another car. Absolutely livid, he chased down the car and stabbed the driver to death, but turns out it was the wrong car. He ended up murdering 20-year-old Jason Bass and was put in jail for 8 weeks before being bailed out. 3 years later, he was awaiting his formal sentencing since he was convicted of second-degree murder and could have faced up to 25 years in prison. He disappeared along with his wife, and they both mailed suicide notes before their car was found near a bridge. Elena's skull was found at the bottom of the bridge that same day, but Adam's was not. He was declared legally dead in 2004, but investigators didn't buy it. He could have easily traveled somewhere after killing his wife. How do we know he didn't do that? People have reported seeing him in Connecticut, then in Florida, then France, and Italy, and last year the FBI actually said there's a huge chance of tracking him down in the next 5 years, so you're going down, Emery. And finally, at number 1 is Lmikhail Crawford. This guy did a number on everyone around him. Honestly, I feel bad for anybody who was around him. Vanishing Houdini act, legitimately. So back in July of 1970, Elma was married to Therese, who was pregnant at the time, and the two already had 3 kids together. 2 weeks before the incidents took place, the family had drafted new wills, leaving a huge fortune to Crawford in case the family died. Don't you already know who the suspect is? Anytime people take out wills, someone's gonna get murdered. He then constructed his own electrocution device using a 15-meter electrical lead and alligator clips. He electrocuted Therese to death in her sleep and then killed and electrocuted the rest of his family. He then loaded all their bodies into his sedan and pushed the whole car off a cliff to try and frame his wife and make the whole thing look like a murder-suicide. Elmer has been missing ever since the murders and was last seen in Western Australia in 1994. There's a reward of $100,000 for any information about him, but to be honest, the guy is now 90 years old. He evaded the police his whole life and got away with it. This man will most likely die before ever stepping foot in jail. Like, if I was him and the police caught me, I would rather just drop dead then and there than be like, yeah, take me to jail. Nope. Starting us off with number 10 is Jack the Stripper, not to be confused with his earlier inspiration Jack the Ripper. So back in 1964 and 65, there occurred in London, England, the Hammersmith nude murders. Those murders encompassed the brutal killing of 6 prostitutes, all of whom were found naked inside or near the River Thames. He killed 2 women before the 6th, and it's not confirmed he was the perpetrator, but it was very likely. The first early victim was 21-year-old Elizabeth Figg, who was found strangled and naked on a north bank of the river. The second victim was 22-year-old Gwyneth Reese, the third was Hannah Tailford, then came Irene Lockwood, Helen Barthélemy, the 6th was Mary Fleming, and the last 2 were Frances Brown and Bridget O'Hara, but interestingly enough, these 2 girls weren't found anywhere near the river. A sketch of the murderer made him seem quite young at the time, and despite there being many suspects, the person was never captured, meaning someone is hiding out there who's killed 8 people and probably more. Coming in at number 9 is John Paul Sr. As an American racing driver, John won the FIA World Challenge for Endurance Drivers in 1978 and 1980, and he won the Trans Am Cat 2 in the year in between, and that's about it in terms of his achievements. Now let's go in chronological order. In 1979, custom agents discovered weed residue on his boat and then found 710 kilograms of it in a nearby truck, which got him 3 years of probation. Then in 1981, his wife, who he had separated from, vanished into thin air, and then he divorced her. Very odd, no investigation into it, but moving on. Then in 1983, a man called Stephen Carson was shot 5 times in Florida, and he claimed it was John who shot him. He was then arrested before fleeing right before his trial. He was caught in Switzerland and then extradited the hell back to the US, where he was imprisoned by 1986. Then he tried to escape, failed, and was eventually granted parole in 1999. But there is more. After he got out, he met an office manager called Colleen Wood. It was a whirlwind romance. She sold her house and quit her job and moved in with him on his boat so they could go on some honeymoon around the world boat trip or something. But the next December, she too had disappeared into thin air. Paul was suspected but not charged, and he too then magically disappeared. A randomer saw him in the Fiji Islands and reported him, but nothing happened. The FBI are still looking for him to question him on Colleen's disappearance, and I feel like they should add his first wife's case into it as well. Like, nobody's looking for her. They should be. At number 8, we have Bible John. You son of a gun. The Bible John is an unknown serial killer that killed 3 women in Scotland back at the end of the 60s. The man had a specific type: young, brunette, attractive, Kinda sounds like me, to be honest. Now, each woman had met him at the Barrowland Ballroom and then I guess got led away by him. The first victim was 25-year-old Patricia Docker, who was found in a garage doorway. Cause of death, strangulation. The second victim was 32-year-old mother of 3, Jemima McDonald, who actually had eyewitnesses. They saw her leaving with a brunette, tall man who had a Glaswegian accent and kept quoting the Bible, hence the name Bible John. The two murders gave up no suspects, and initially the police didn't even think they were murdered by the same person, despite all the shocking similarities between both crimes. The third victim was 29-year-old Helen Patek, who had been badly beaten and Helen met the man with her sister Jean and he had introduced himself as John. When the third case was brought to light, it was clear they had a serial killer on their hands, and despite having countless suspects including serial killer Peter Tobin, there was no arrest or conviction made. Bible John never killed again, but he's still out there somewhere when he should be in jail. Filling at number 7 slot is William Morales. So this man was the chief bomb maker for the Armed Forces of National Liberation, which was a Puerto Rican paramilitary organization that wanted Puerto Rico to be independent. William had joined the FALN by 1970 and was implicated in around 50 bombings within 4 years. The worst incident occurred in January of 1975 when the Francis Tavern Museum was bombed, killing 4 people and injuring over 50. William was actually interviewed by the FBI in 76 but was let go since they thought he was just an activist and not a suspect. Oh boy, was you wrong. 2 years later, William was in the middle of making a pipe bomb, but he messed up. The timer on his bombs was set by the hour hand, but he had filed down the minute hand by accident, and so the bomb detonated in his hand 4 hours early, and he got it bad. He lost an eye, 9 fingers, his lips, his jaw was fractured, and of course, he had passed out. When he woke up, he tried destroying the evidence before the police could get there, but when they did, authorities found 200 pounds of explosives and 66 sticks of dynamite, and they took him to a hospital because, criminal as he may have been, his injuries were extensive and dire. He was convicted in 1979 and sentenced to 99 years in jail, but after being moved from prison to Bellevue General Hospital, he managed to escape out of his window. He quickly fled to Mexico, and despite being caught, he wasn't extradited and then just went to Cuba to live since being given political asylum. But till this day, he's still on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list with a reward of $100,000 being offered for him. Now at number 6 is Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Now this man is suspected to be a massive drug lord and leader of the Sinaloa cartel, because believe it or not, Narcos Mexico was based on a true story. He started off smuggling a few kilos here and there before solidifying himself as a cocaine trafficker. When El Padrino was arrested, his cartel split into 2 factions, the Tijuana cartel and the Sinaloa cartel. In 2006, the government launched a major offensive against drug trafficking and the Tijuana cartel got screwed, which let the Sinaloa cartel swoop in and take their territories, and thus war ensued. Their cartel brings in multi-tons of cocaine and distributes them all over the US. He's been wanted by Mexico's Attorney General since 1998. People think he had plastic surgery done so he would become unrecognizable just so he wouldn't have to leave Mexico and live in hiding. The FBI is offering $5 million for any information about him. Damn, Zeddy El Mayo. Got it going on. Coming in at number 5 is Ernie Newvoyan. Now good old Ernie over here was the biggest perpetrator of employment fraud in Estonia ever, and this is how he did it. Don't get any ideas. Now he would post huge ads on behalf of Interwork Corporation about various jobs in the Middle East, Europe, and South America. People who applied had to pay a fee in advance to pay for the foreign passport, travel fees, etc. And keep in mind, unemployment was at a high of 17%, and the fee he was asking for was 2,335 kroon, despite the average salary at the time being just 1,070 kroon. He also used many designer brands as tactics by saying they were limited jobs, so people started bribing him 1,200 kroons to be bumped up in the queue for a job. Arnie told everyone that visas, info, tickets, everything would be handed over to them on March 23rd, 1999. But alas, his office had already closed back in February, so when the job seekers got there, they found all their documents that they had sent in the trash. But honestly, they should have done more research. One of Arnie's listed business addresses was a literal wasteland. Like, come on, people. Around 3,000 to 5,000 people got scammed by him, making him a hefty profit. By 1993, Arnie started going by the name Daniel Rosenberg and was advertising shady cars online and again defrauding people. Then the next year he went to Norway and started offering impoverished people jobs in Bulgaria, again manipulating 400 people. This guy made over 10 million kroons and was never caught. He went around defrauding half of Europe and wasn't caught. Come on now. And number 4 is Christopher Dale Flannery, aka Mr. Rent-A-Kill. This Australian contract killer had it rough from the start. By 17 years old, he'd been convicted of carrying firearms, police assault, housebreaking, and more. When he was finally released from jail, he became a bouncer, but seeing how that was boring, he moved on to contract killing, as everybody does. His first kill was a barrister called Roger Wilson, but since they didn't find the body, he was acquitted. He was then almost immediately arrested for killing Raymond Loxley, a brothel owner, 2 years prior. And again, he was acquitted. After that, he tried to improve his life and, just be on the right track by moving to Sydney and working as a bodyguard for crime figure George Freeman. Caught in the gang wars, he got paranoid and would always carry a gun with him wherever he went. In 1984, he was suspected of attempting to kill a drug squad detective, and things got messy when shots rained down on Christopher's house. Everyone survived and business continued. The next year, he was sent to kill Tony Spaghetti Eustace, and he managed to shoot him 6 times, but not enough to actually kill him. Police tried to speak to him, but he told them to F off, and then he died. Later that year, his boss Freeman called him for a meeting, and as he left, he caught a cab and went on his way. But he disappeared, leaving 2 children behind, never to return. So either Freeman killed him or he split because he was scared he would be killed. Either way, he's a fugitive on the run. Filling our number 3 slot is Hayat Boumedy. Now Hayat had her fair share of a bad life. Her mum died when she was 8, her dad wasn't there, and she was tossed between families in foster care and was beaten numerous times. In July of 2009, she married Emery Coulibaly, and both were Muslim and extremely religious to an extremist level. In 2010, police found a bunch of assault rifle ammunition in their apartment, which is, not the best. Now, Hayat was sought after by authorities because her husband was the prime suspect for the 2015 Montrouge shooting that was one of the Ile-de-France attacks. The shooting involved 3 attackers that killed 17 people before the police eventually shot all 3, and Emery was one of them. But before any of this even happened, he had already helped Hayat flee the country. She traveled to Spain at the end of 2014 and then made it to Istanbul, where Turkish intelligence found it to be sus. They surveilled her for the next 2 days, after which she went to the Syrian border. At this time, her husband had just used her car in another attack and she was complicit in it. She's still currently wanted for helping Emery carry out his attacks and has been dubbed France's most wanted woman. Now at number 2 is Lord Lucan, aka Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan. I know, right? I love when noble people are on here, it's just that much juicier. So after World War II, Lucan was studying at Eton College, which is a very posh all-boys college in the UK for like the 1%. Now sadly, he took a liking to gambling and went on to become a professional gambler. The man was so hot, he was even considered to play James Bond, like, hello. He was hot. By 1963, he married Veronica Duncan and the couple had 3 children together, but after 9 years together, the marriage was going up in flames. Lucan moved out of the family home and a huge custody battle occurred over the kids, which he lost. After taking so many hits in his personal life, Lucan became depressed, paranoid, and erratic. All his gambling losses didn't help the situation either. To try and get custody, he started spying on Veronica to prove she was unfit to raise the kids, since she had postnatal depression and had just fired their long-term nanny. After many nannies came Sandra Rivet in 1974. On the 7th of November, after putting the kids to bed, she went to the basement to make tea for Veronica, and once there, someone bludgeoned her to death with a lead pipe as the murderer told her to shut up. Apparently, Veronica heard her husband's voice and went down there, wherein they started fighting as well. Eventually, he admitted he had just killed Sandra, and Veronica agreed to help him escape. But the smart girl made a run for it and got away, after which Lord Lucan just disappeared. He called his mother and went to a friend's house, and then literally into thin air, he was gone. He literally evaporated. I don't get how someone so prolific like him could have successfully hidden for that long. He was declared legally dead in 2016 at age 81, but you can't just assume someone's dead because they're 80 years old. Come on now. People live long lives. And finally, at number 1 is Assata Shakur. Now this woman has racked up quite a few charges in her long life. As a former member of the Black Liberation Army and Black Panther Party, political and racial activism were her whole life. And the BLA engaged in many armed shootouts against the government since they would rob banks and kill police officers. At the start of the 70s, there was a multi-state manhunt for her after she had robbed a bank in Queens, then in the Bronx, and even a church, which was called Our Lady of the Presentation Church. The manhunt started after the FBI believed she was the head of a BLA cell that had killed a bunch of police officers. During the New Jersey Turnpike shootout, Assata killed Trooper Werner Forrester by shooting him in the head twice with his own gun, but both sides had been wounded. Between 1973 and 77, she had been indicted 10 times for kidnapping a heroin dealer, 2 bank robberies, 2 attempted murders of officers, and the rest of the charges were due to Turnpike. Many trials and mistrials occurred, of which she was only convicted once, acquitted thrice, and dismissed thrice. She was kept at Rikers Island in solitary confinement, but fellow BLA member Angela Davis claimed she was a political prisoner, so they started planning her escape. 3 members of the army got to the prison with dynamite and 2 guns, taking 2 officers hostage before escaping in a van. Wanted posters were put up for her, but in retaliation, her supporters put up Assata Shakur is welcome here posters in response. In 1984, she was given political asylum in Cuba, but the FBI is still offering $2 million for her. Fun fact, she's actually Tupac's godmother and step-aunt. Pretty cool. Starting us off at number 10 is Charlie Chopoff. Now this person was an unidentified serial killer that had their murderous streak in Manhattan at the start of the 1970s. And this person's victims of choice were people aged 8 to 9 years old. So yeah, they were very young. Now let's go through the victims. The first was 8-year-old Douglas Owens, and Douglas had been mutilated and stabbed a total of 38 times. The next was an unidentified black youth who sustained the same injuries as Douglas, but actually managed to survive. The third victim was 9-year-old Wendell Hubbard, then the next year it was 9-year-old Luis Ortiz, again same injuries. Now the last victim was 8-year-old Stephen Cropper, who the killer attacked in August of 73. He ended up bleeding to death on a roof. Now the only suspect police ever thought to arrest was Ernie Soto in 1974, and that's because he had confessed to killing Stephen Cropper. The only boy that survived said Soto looked like the killer but refused to 100% confirm that it was him. But he was soon ruled out anyway, since records showed that Soto was in custody at the Manhattan State Hospital at the time of the murders. So whoever this person was got away with it and was never found, which is disgusting. Coming in at number 9 is Matteo Messina Denaro. I've been putting off putting Matteo on the list for quite a while because he was recommended to me so many times. Matteo, also known as Diabolique, has been on the most wanted list since 1993 and is still one of the top 10 most wanted criminals in the world. Now you're probably like, okay, what did he even do? And Matteo was a Sicilian mafia boss in charge of Cosa Nostra. This man was a well-known womanizer and just all-round rich playboy, and when his dad died in 1998, he became the head of the area as well as any neighboring cities. After the mafia boss of Trapani got arrested, Matteo took over that region too, and at one point was commanding over 900 men. Now the mafia makes its money through extortion, drug trafficking, racketeering, as well as bullying people into paying them for protection. Cosa Nostra went on a major terrorist campaign in 1992 and 93 when they bombed Capaci and Via D'Amelio. All the mafia bosses came together and decided to retaliate against the Italian state and launch a bunch of bomb attacks. Those attacks ended up injuring 93 people and killing 10. He then went into hiding and spent his time between Bulgaria and Aspra with his lover Maria Messi, but by 2000 she too had been arrested for aiding and abetting him. In 2002, Matteo was sentenced to life in prison for the bombings, but he can't do a sentence since no one knows where he is. At number 8 we have the Honolulu Strangler, also referred to as the Honolulu Rapist, and he was Hawaii's first serial killer, and they also remained unknown till this day. Now back in the middle of the 80s, the killer murdered 5 women. The first was 25-year-old Vicky Gale Purdy, the second was 17-year-old Regina Sakamu, who'd been strangled and sexually assaulted. The third was 21-year-old Denise Hughes, who suffered the same injuries, and all the women were found with their hands bound behind their backs. The fourth victim was 25-year-old Louise Medeiros, who was killed on her way to the airport. And the final victim was 36-year-old Linda Pischer. But despite having a 27-person task force on the job, no one was found. Witnesses of Linda's murder said the man was of mixed race or white and drove a light-colored van. There's still a $25,000 reward for any information about the killer, killer, but it's been 40 years since the murders took place. Filling our number 7 slot is Chota Shaquille. Now this Indian crime boss worked right under Dawood Ibrahim, who's featured in part 3 of the series if you guys are, paying attention. Now Shaquille joined the Dawood company in 1988 and was essentially managing everything that happened on a day-to-day basis. As one of the most wanted men in India, Shaquille was part of orchestrating the 1993 Bombay bombings and is wanted for terrorism, murder, extortion, and more. He also handled a lot of the company's drug trafficking and also trafficked diamonds from Africa for weapons. Rumor has it he was hiding out in Karachi, Pakistan after a picture surfaced of him for the first time in decades. In 2017, a voice clip came out claiming to be Dawood, saying that Shaquille had died, but that was soon investigated and concluded to be fake as hell, so he's still out there somewhere pretending to be dead. Now at number 6 is Giovanni Motti, another Italian mafia boss for the list. Now Giovanni was also part of the Sicilian mafia and has been on Italy's most wanted list since 1998. When his uncle Matteo died, not the same Matteo as I mentioned before, Giovanni became the de facto head of the Motti mafia clan and became the most powerful man in Palermo. He went into hiding in 1993 since he's wanted for many things, mainly the murder of police officer Beppe Montana and other miscellaneous mafia activities, as they all do. Even the current Italian mafia bosses have no idea where Giovanni is. Some think he's dead, whereas others think he's just hiding somewhere in Agrigento. Who knows? Coming in at number 5 is Roberto Solis, and this one's funny because amongst Roberto's many occupations, poet is one of them, as is convicted murderer and armored car robber. But poet obviously had to be on the list because he's not just a cold-blooded killer, no, he has a creative side as well, you guys. Now Roberto has over 30 aliases and was caught after he murdered a security guard during a robbery. He served 17 years for that and was finally given parole in 92, but those 17 years did nothing for him in terms of growth and retribution. Roberto met a woman called Heather who he convinced to get a job at a security company and guided her into driving away in a car containing $2.5 million. The Bonnie and Clyde duo then went on the run together, became lovers, had a kid, and then evidently didn't work out because Heather turned herself in 2005. Roberto, however, did not and is still out there somewhere, but where, my friends, is their child? At number 4 is Mickey Green. This English drug lord slash gangster sounds like someone auditioning for Britain's Got Talent, not Britain's leading drug dealer. Now Green was the head of the Wembley mob in the 70s and the group did a lot of armed robberies. He's wanted in multiple countries for smuggling drugs and he apparently orchestrated the murders of the London criminals Solly Nahome and Gilbert Winter, who is also included in part 4. Mickey apparently has a bunch of police and detectives under his payroll as well, which explains why he's managed to avoid arrest for over 20 years. After drug trafficker Michael was arrested in 98, Mickey was arrested in Spain for his involvement in a cocaine trafficking ring, which by the way was worth 150 million pounds. This man himself is worth like 75 million pounds, like Mickey may be a criminal, but he's rich as hell. Anyway, he was released after being arrested and went back to Spain, and that's where he remains. Reports came in July of this year claiming he had died, but I don't know if I fully believe that. People fake their deaths all the time, especially if their business and livelihood involves anything like this. Filling at number 3 slot is Renato Cini, who wins this list's number 1 spot for most complicated last name, subject to change. Now Renato was part of Camorra, which is the biggest and oldest mafias in Italy. In the 80s he was involved in torturing and murdering Giacomo Frattini, who was part of another mafia, and all to avenge the murder of a loyalist. Frattini was found in the boot of a car with his hands and heart found in a bag separate from his body, if that gives you any idea how dangerous and deadly Renato actually is. In 2014, Renato was sentenced to life for the murder, but he's been in hiding for quite a while now. I mean, he is one of Italy's most wanted fugitives, so I mean, I'm guessing he's not going to be at the nearest 7-Eleven buying a snack. Now at number 2 is Anders Cameron Stensvig Dale. Did I say the previous last name was hard? This one is the new trophy winner, oh my god. I couldn't actually find the pronunciation of it anywhere online, so I tried my best, you guys. Either way, Anders, also known as Abu Abdurrahman the Norwegian, is a Norwegian terrorist based in Yemen and linked to Al-Qaeda. In 2008, Anders went to Yemen to join Al-Qaeda, and there he learned how to make bombs, car bombs, bomb belts, and more. During this, he broke off contact with his pregnant wife and then married a Moroccan woman in 2010. But by 2012, his family had reported that he was missing. He was already wanted by many countries including the UK and the US. The US and Norwegian intelligence services claimed that in 2015 Anders was still very much alive. Where he is now is anyone's guess. I feel so bad for his pregnant wife, like what the hell? Imagine that happening to you and your husband just completely changing, like, hello, we had a life together, I was about to give birth to our child, wild, but I guess not. I guess you'd rather bomb people, Anders. And finally, at number 1 is Shinsuke Takasugi. I find this one so interesting because Takasugi was a Japanese celebrity. He was an actor and a singer and had a lot of fans. Now, most of his fan base came from people who liked Kamen Rider Super 1, where he played the lead role Kazuya Oki. Now, the actor became a fugitive after taking advantage of his own fans. Between 2003 and 2012, he told his fans that his character's henshin belt was taken by the Yakuza, which is like the Japanese mafia, and that he needed money to get it back. He never once returned any of the money his fans donated, which amounted to around 50 million yen, which is about $450,000, which is a lot of money, you guys. After the truth came out, he was sued hardcore but never appeared in court and disappeared altogether 3 years ago.